watching KSL Sports Live.
Hey, happy Super Bowl Eve, everyone. Do you want some football? Well, we've got a bit of football coming your way today on KSL Sports Live. We're going to dive into the schedule releases for BYU and Utah football with KSL Sports insiders Mitch, Harper, and Steve Bartle coming up. Also, BYU looks to get a quad one win at Cincinnati while Utah's visiting West Virginia in college hoops. And even in the midst of all those losses, we've got a few good reasons why you should be pretty excited about the Utah Jazz right now. That's all coming up in just a bit, but we're going to get things started off today on the ice. The Utah Hockey Club riding a 2-game win streak thanks to back-to-back game winners in overtime from Dylan Gunther, now back-to-back road games against the top 2 teams in the Eastern Conference. Now, the last time Utah faced off with Carolina, Karel Vejmelka recorded a career-high 49 saves in a 4-1 win. Today, Veggie back in the net against the top offensive team in the NHL. This was a much different Carolina team this time, though, a team that made goal-scoring look easy. A 2-on-1 break in the first period. Jordan Stahl dishes to Jalen Chatfield, who goes top shelf for the 1-0 lead. Utah played very well on the power play today. Late in the first, they take advantage of one. Okay, so we missed that. Josh Doan scored, so we go to the second period now. Carolina goes goal-scoring crazy. Seth Jarvis on the power play. Then Sebastian Aho takes advantage of the risk taken by Karel Vejmelka, scores for the 3-1 lead. But then before it could get too far out of hand, you see Clinton Keller stealing the puck and scoring to make it 3-2. 4 minutes later, Utah on the power play, a chance to tie it up. Instead, they give up the shorthanded goal for the second straight game. Utah ends up trailing 5-2 going into the third period. All right, is there any way Utah can pull off a miracle? Down 3 goals in the final 4 minutes. Well, Clayton Keller, he's going to try. Scores Utah's second power play goal to cut the lead to 5-3. But the Canes would still score 2 more goals, and that would be it. Utah loses 7-3. The most goals they've given up in a game this season. Keller has 20 goals on the year. That's the 5th season of his career with at least 20 goals scored. Unfortunately, Utah loses.
We were in that game and we kind of just did it to ourselves a little bit, giving up, a shorty and just simple mistakes. It sucks to lose that one, but it's a huge game tomorrow for us. So, we learn from, the mistakes, turn the page, and be ready to go tomorrow. I think it's, we all know it's a huge game for us.
Now on to college hoops. BYU's hovering pretty close to that NCAA tournament bubble currently with a 6-5 record in the Big 12, and they're ranked 36th in the net rankings. BYU's listed as one of Joe Lunardi's last 4 teams in his bracketology. Well, today, a quad 1 road game that would certainly boost the resume if BYU can get the win. BYU taking on Cincinnati, a team the Cougars Utes have just 1 road win all season. Today, they're taking a great season so far. Winners in 11 of their last 12 games. The problem is, they play in the WAC, a conference that's probably just getting 1 bid to March Madness, the team that wins the conference tournament, right? So all the Wolverines can really do is continue to build momentum to make that March run down in Vegas, right? Well, today they did just that, build momentum against Tarleton State down in Orem. Carter Welling banks in an early 3-pointer. UVU's up 5-2. There would be over 20 fouls called in the first half, which would slow down the pace of play, but it wouldn't slow down Tanner Toulson. He was hot from 3, specifically from the corner. He would have 21 points in the first half. He wasn't just shooting well. Dominic Nelson to Toulson for the alley-oop. Then to close out the half, Toulson, why not another 3-pointer, right? He's feeling it. Utah Valley goes into halftime leading by 3, 39-36. In the second half, UVU would really start to get the rest of their offense going. Jackson Holcomb throws down the oop. Then Nelson, he's also going to hammer one in. UVU's now up by 10. Toulson would finish with 24 points, hits the 3. UVU's rolling. They're up by 18. Then Kylan Green puts Arlington away, hitting back-to-back 3s. UVU blows past Tarleton, 81-56.
They go to Grayson Allen. 3's away. Got it. Wow, clutch. Will Hardy takes the timeout.
Inbound by O'Neal. Skips it over the top to Allen. Gets a good look and hits! We're going to overtime!
Yeah, the Jazz first-round draft pick in 2018 was an assassin last night in Phoenix. Grayson Allen sinking the Jazz chances at a win in the final seconds with a pair of big-time three-pointers. Now, Jazz fans, are you feeling frustrated? I mean, we've never seen this type of season in franchise history before. The worst win percentage in team history, which currently is the worst record in the Western Conference. Now, those losses, they can be painful to watch. But maybe it's time, if you haven't already, to change your perspective a bit. For example, take a closer look at Isaiah Collier and what he's been doing. Last night, Collier showed once again why the Jazz may have found the point guard of the future with the 29th pick in last year's draft. Collier finished the game with 15 points and a career-high 13 assists. 10 of those came in the first half. His 10 first-half assists are second most all-time by a rookie in one half. Ben Simmons had 11 and a half back in 2018, but then again, was he really a rookie? I digress. Collier's 15-13 double-double marked his third straight double-double. Take a look at what he's done. 11 points and 10 assists on Monday against the Pacers. Then a 20-point, 11-assist double-double in the Jazz comeback win over Golden State at Delta Center on Wednesday night. His 5 double-doubles this season are already 5th most by a rookie in Utah Jazz franchise history. And it's not just the rookies that we are seeing substantial growth from this season. How about third-year center Walker Kessler? Kessler, he's been a force in the paint lately, averaging 14.25 rebounds and 12.5 points per game over the last 8 games. But his last 2 performances have been downright dominant. 15 points, 18 rebounds, 3 blocks against the Warriors, and then 19 points, 22 rebounds, and 3 blocks last night against the Suns. In women's basketball, Jonna Neepkins and the Utah Utes hosting UCF at the Huntsman Center. The Utes can light it up from downtown in the first quarter. That's Jenna Johnson with the straightaway 3, and the Utah is up by 9. A minute later, Neepkins from deep. She drains that one. Then on the next possession for the Utes, Reese Ross from the top of the key. Start of the second half, Neepkins, why not another one? She had another big-time game for the Utes. Goes 6 of 7 from three-point range. She led Utah with 32 points and a 44-point win over UCF. All right, college basketball is great, but do you miss football season? Well, it's time for us to already look ahead to next fall. The Big 12 did drop their football schedules for the 2025 season. We'll show you how the Utes and Cougars schedules, what they look like, and KSL Sports Insiders Mitch Harper and Steve Bartle will join us for a deeper dive into those matchups. And a spark came at the right time for Utah Hockey Club last week. Dylan Gunther with some late-game heroics after coming back from an injury. We'll relive those thrilling moments next. It's never too early to look ahead to next football season, is it? And on Tuesday, the Big 12 gave us a big reason to do so. The release of the 2025 schedules. The Utes schedule starts off with an old Pac-12 matchup, a road game at the Rose Bowl against UCLA, and then they open up at Big 12 play at home against Texas Tech in September. The Utes also have some favorable bye weeks early in October and early in November. Their toughest stretch, though, Arizona State and Colorado sandwiched around the BYU game down in Provo. As for the Cougars, well, their bye week comes at an unfavorable time already in week 3. That feels a bit too early, doesn't it? Then a brutal 6-game stretch with 4 road games, and one of the 2 home games is Utah. They open the November schedule with a road game against Texas Tech, who will be one of the favorites to win the league after a game in Ames against another contender in Iowa State.
The Big 12 released the 2025 schedules. Now BYU and Utah fans can make plans for what should be a wild season of football this fall. Joining us to take a deeper dive into the schedule is our BYU Sports Insider, Mitch Harper, and Utah Sports Insider, Steve Bartle. You can read, watch, and listen to all of their outstanding work and coverage on KSLSports.com. All right, guys, we have to start with the obvious, right? I mean, everyone's looking at the schedules like, when's the BYU-Utah game? We now know when it is.
Right.
But it's not a time that we all expected. What do you think about playing in mid-October?
I think that it was surprising to see that date, October 18th, because I think a lot of coaches, Kalani Sitake felt it was going to be probably the end of the season, like many of us did. But I'm okay with it because history's shown that, this game hasn't been played at the end of the year in the last 15 years. But the problem is that the Big 12 is not owning a weekend for this historic great game. This is your best game. Own a certain weekend and plant the flag that this is the weekend when BYU and Utah will be played annually. That, to me, is the issue because it's getting tossed around like it's just a meaningless game.
You see it the same way?
Yeah, a little bit. I think I see why there's value in placing it somewhere not in rivalry week, right? Because what comes after rivalry week? Championship week. And with Utah hoping to get back to championship contending status, BYU being perceived and going to be one of the top contenders in the Big 12 this year, knowing the toll that game takes on these guys, on these players, on this team, or on these teams, I think I appreciate why they wouldn't want to have that game that final weekend of the regular season. It is definitely a shock to the system not to have it because we're so used to that game, especially in conference play, being the final game of the year. But I think I see the value in not having it there.
I think there's little doubt that is the premier rivalry in the conference, especially after what they did last year, right? All right, let's take a little broader look at the schedule. Steve, we'll start with you. Just your overall thoughts when you see Utah's schedule.
Yeah, pretty fair schedule. I think with where the buys have come in week 6 and week 11, I think it sets up really nicely for Utah. The month of October, they're not going to have to leave the state. They do have to travel 50 miles south, so a tough road game, we know, going down to Provo. But outside of that, this schedule, I think, sets up really nicely for Utah to first build some momentum early on in the season, hopefully contend having that momentum in the month of October during their toughest stretch, and then finishing the year with 3 games. I think it sets up really nicely for them to build and maintain some momentum.
What stood out to you, Mitch?
Coming into the schedule release, I looked at BYU as the favorite in the Big 12 conference going into next year. Now I would say maybe I'm lowering the expectations because I think the Big 12 stacked up a difficult slate for BYU logistics-wise. Opponents, we know this league can be a perceived bottom feeder, and they can rise to the top. The issue is that some of the logistics of this schedule are built in no matter what the strength of the opponents are. When you look at you have a bye in week 3, that's way too early. It's the earliest bye week since 2013 for BYU. And a little bit of that is due to Tom Homo keeping the East Carolina game. That was self-inflicted by BYU to keep East Carolina on the non-conference schedule. 2 Eastern time zone games, no byes the following week. The Utah game, no bye before, no bye after, and the week after, to Steve's point earlier about how draining that game can be, you go at Iowa State, who's going to be probably a preseason top 4 team, won 11 games last year. So I think some of the logistics are very difficult with this schedule. You've got 6 straight weeks where you only have two home games. It's a difficult slate. The Big 12 did no favors for BYU.
Let's continue looking at some of the challenges, Steve. What's the toughest road game for Utah? Or maybe what's the most important game for Utah on the schedule that you point to, say, that is a game that can make or break their season if they win that game?
Yeah, I think the most important game for Utah is the conference opener against Texas Tech because that kind of sets the tone for them the rest of the year. There are going to be much more difficult games. Texas Tech is going to be pretty formidable this season, I believe, with what Joey McGuire has done there with the Red Raiders. I think if Utah can get that win to kind of build that early momentum in conference play, that'll help them moving forward into that next phase of the schedule that I was talking about in October. So I think, for Utah, you need to kind of find wins that will help kind of ignite some excitement again, right? That's what this fan base needs for Utah. They need that excitement, and I think getting a win over the Red Raiders would do that. I think that's the most important game for Utah on that schedule.
Mitch, you dug into some of the challenges of BYU's schedule, but what is that one road game, that one road test, or maybe that crucial game in the season that could really help make or break their season?
Week 5 at Colorado is going to be a big one too. It's a Big 12 opener for BYU, and I really would have liked to have seen that game be week 3. Colorado had an opening there too. Colorado ends up getting Houston on the road. They host BYU in week 5. It's going to be a bit of a revenge game for the Buffs because BYU dominated Colorado 36-14 in that Alamo Bowl game, and I think that's just going to be a great opportunity for BYU. There's going to probably be a lot of eyeballs on that game, and from a national narrative perspective, we saw the impact of playing the Buffs, what it did for BYU at season's end. I think that can be a similar impact because I think Colorado will probably be at worst 2-2, 3-1. They're going to be a huge draw. That could help BYU from a narrative perspective as they navigate what will be a tough Big 12 road.
Is it way too early to have a way too early prediction on your win-losses already? Do you guys look at that already?
I've got BYU going 10-2.
Okay.
I think BYU could be 10-2 with this schedule, and this is the best BYU team that Kalani's assembled.
Wow.
The talent, the depth, A lot of it's going to hinge on Jake Retzlaff, though. You know, can Jake Retzlaff become what Zach Wilson was in 2020, where you're talking 30-plus touchdowns, single-digit interceptions? You've got to take care of the football. I think a lot of it hinges on him. And if he takes another leap forward, BYU is going to be in the conversation in November again, and maybe they just need a few tiebreakers to go their way this time. But they'll be in the mix. And they got to stay healthy, too. That's going to be critical. But they've got depth, too, to navigate injuries as well. But Retzlaff is key, and he's got to stay healthy because there's questions about the depth at quarterback.
Yeah, there's a lot for Utah to sort out on the offense side of the ball, but they return a good portion of their defense. A lot of guys had to step up this past season due to the injuries. I think that's going to be the focal point of Utah's outlook next year. How much can Devin Dampier come in and just kind of pick up where he left off this past season under Jason Beck at New Mexico? I think I've looked at the schedule, and just with the way the schedule sets up, it's a really nice schedule for them. Best case scenario, they go 10-2, but that's pretty optimistic. That's everything clicking and that sort of stuff. But they don't have the scheduled losses like they did this past year with Arizona and TCU coming off bye weeks going into those games. Colorado is the only team that does that. I think I've settled on 8-4, 9-3 for Utah as the most likely best outcome. But there is a chance that if everything clicks, the offense is humming, 10-2 is certainly in the equation as well. But also, they could end up 7-5, 6-6, just the same.
We've seen BYU go from 5-7 to 10-2. So anything is possible in the Big 12. That's why it's so much fun. If Devin Dampier has 19 rushing touchdowns and can get up to 20 passing touchdowns, then Utah looks completely different. So many things could happen. But now we know the schedule. It's going to be fun. Guys, thanks so much. Steve Bartle, Mitch Harper, you know who these guys are. Read them on KSLSports.com.
Lacrosse opened the season up at Rice Eccles, the preseason 19th ranked team in the country, hosting Delaware. 4 minutes left. It's Jonas Hunter taking it from behind the net, spinning and tying the game up at 11. 2 minutes left. Utah down a goal, but with a one-man advantage, Luke McNamara, he ties it up again. Then with less than a minute to play, Delaware's Bennett Palmer splits the defenders, and that's it. The game winner, Delaware getting the win here in Salt Lake City. All right, in just his first 2 games back from injury, Dylan Gunther has already delivered 2 game-winning goals, both in the final seconds of overtime last week. Thursday night's heroics in Columbus helped Utah pick up points in the standings in a 4 of a 5-game stretch. Those back-to-back wins were important ones, as Utah is now in the midst of back-to-back road games against the top 2 teams in the East. Utah lost the first of those today against Carolina, but there's still optimism that after tomorrow's game in Washington, Utah can come back from the Four Nations break in a position to make a stretch run for a playoff spot. We'll keep our eyes on that. Well, when we come back, it was a special night for a great cause at Skyridge High School. I'll explain next. Fan of high school athletics in our state, then you're probably familiar with Dusty Litster, the face and voice of high school sports for many years now. Dusty and his family, though, could now use our support. Lately, you haven't heard Dusty on the mic calling games or breaking down the matchups. That's because he's been battling a brain tumor. And on Friday night, Lehi and Skyridge, they came together to honor and support Dusty with a Dusty Litster night. Skyridge head coach Jeff Gardner, he spoke with the KSL Sports Rewind crew about why the teams decided to help support Dusty in his fight.
You know, our purpose of doing it is just to let him know that we're there with him in the fight, that we love him, that we think about him often, that we're here for him, and that he's not alone.
Yeah, if you would like to help donate or support Dusty and his family, you can do so. They have a GoFundMe set up. You can find all the information for that at KSLSports.com. You can see it right there on your screen, the GoFundMe address that you need to go to. Dusty, we love you. We're there for you. We are cheering for you and your family throughout this entire process.